Hi everyone, welcome back to my 20-year film festival. This is a series in which I recommend 14 movies from each of the last 20 years, basically making a 2-week film festival for out of each year if you watch one movie a night. I just got finished with 2005, moving on to 2006, and though I wasn't anticipating the movies that came out this year quite as much as 2005, I was still mighty impressed at the end of the year by the stuff that had come out during the course of this year. And I'd like to start by getting into Casino Royale. I had this little rule about this list, and that I don't have sequels or franchise movies unless it's the first installment in a franchise and could act as a standalone movie, and Casino Royale can certainly do that. It is sort of a reboot of the James Bond franchise, of course, with Daniel Craig playing Bond, and it's the start of his career as a 00. He is newly made a 00 at the start of the film. Martin Campbell's the director. He also directed GoldenEye, who most people would think that GoldenEye, I think, is the best of the Pierce Brosnan movies. Personally, I like The World Is Not Enough, despite the fact that Denise Richards is in it. But still, decent movie. Casino Royale, though, is good in different ways. Daniel Craig makes an excellent James Bond, much more believable as an action hero, a guy who can take down other guys brutally than Pierce Brosnan necessarily. Though Pierce Brosnan didn't have his moments, but yeah. So the plot of the movie is, of course, reflected in the first James Bond book, Casino Royale, after which this is adapted from. Bond has been assigned to enter a high-stakes card game, a poker game, in order to win money away from a bad guy who's like an arms dealer. Eva Green, this was not the first movie she was in. She was in The Dreamers, the Bertolucci movie prior to that. But there's few actresses I can think of that are more well-suited to playing an enticing lady tempting Bond than Eva Green. She's absolutely stunning, and she's a terrific actress, too. Mads Mikkelsen, who went on to play Hannibal in the recently canceled series, Hannibal Lecter, plays Le Chiffre, and also Jeffrey Wright is in this movie as a CIA guy who Bond has contact with, and of course Judi Dench as M. She's a holdover from the Pierce Brosnan movies. I think she's probably the only person that migrated from that period to the new Bond period. Yeah, I mean, everyone's very familiar with this movie. It's you know, a good action movie, lots of fun, and some good suspense as well. I like movies with card games in it anyway. Those are a lot of fun. Next, I'd like to talk about Stranger Than Fiction. Stranger Than Fiction is directed by Mark Forrester and was written by a guy kind of as a way of... I can't remember the name of this writer. He went on to write and direct a movie called Mr. Magorium's Wonder Emporium. And he's just sort of one of those sort of rebel screenwriters who sort of twists the conventions, or at least calls attention to the conventions of storytelling in the movies that he made, in this sense anyway. The main character is Harold Crick. He's played by Will Ferrell in a relatively restrained performance. Normally I'm not a big fan of Will Ferrell, but I like him a lot in this movie. Harold Crick is a guy who works for the IRS, and suddenly he begins noticing that someone is narrating his life. Emma Thompson is the narrator. As it turns out, Emma Thompson is actually the author of a book in which Harold Crick is the main character. So you have this sort of very sort of weird merging of parallel realities in which the author and her fictional creation are actually living in the same world. Very bizarre. Emma Thompson's having trouble finishing her book. Her sort of modus operandi is to kill each one of her main characters in a way that is rather poetic. And she's gotten a lot of acclaim for this, but she's having trouble with her new book, and so her publisher has assigned Queen Latifah to help her out. I'm not sure exactly how she's supposed to be helping her, other than picking up her discarded cigarette butts. but she's there basically, so Emma Thompson has someone to speak with about what she's doing. It's a common trope of movies in which characters who normally would be isolated has someone or something to talk to, so we know a little bit about what's going on with them. That's definitely true of Castaway, the Tom Hanks movie, in which he basically talks to a volleyball. He assigns the volleyball personality so he can speak to it, and that's not only helpful to him psychologically in dealing with his isolation, but it's also helpful to the audience so we know what he's thinking. So anyway, the Harold Crick character, in addition to hearing the narration that he's going to die, that seems to be coming from nowhere, he is dealing with work issues, and he's dealing with this audit that he's doing of a baker played by Maggie Gyllenhaal. Incidentally, this movie was filmed in Chicago, but it's set in New York City because the street names are New York, right? Yeah, anyway, I recognized a few locations when I saw the movie. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, it's a fun little movie. It's kind of crazy, but it's pretty cool. The Prestige. The next movie I'd like to talk about from 2006 is The Prestige. Of course, Christopher Nolan the previous year, did Batman Begins, and this was his follow-up. He got Christian Bale in to star in it, alongside Hugh Jackman as two rival magicians in the early 1900s. I forget exactly what year it's set in, but it's definitely not the present. The two of them are rivals, basically. They used to be partners in assisting Michael Caine. Michael Caine is a veteran magician. But when the two of them, one of them, their wife dies, basically, and it's the other guy's fault, or so the other guy blames him. So the two of them, they start this rivalry in which they're constantly trying to one-up each other. Christian Bale comes up with a trick which he calls the transported man, in which he enters one cabinet on stage and then pops out of another one a few seconds later, and everyone just like, oh, that was a good trick. And Hugh Jackman's like, oh, I don't know how he did that. That's like the craziest thing I've ever seen. It's amazing. So he spends the rest of his life trying to figure out how Christian Bale did that trick. Meanwhile, of course, Christian Bale is very, jealous of his secrets and is, guarding his techniques very closely. But yeah, that rivalry is the meat of the movie. The structure of this movie is also very bizarre. It flashes forward and back in a way that can be quite confusing because each one of these characters at one point gets his hand on the other guy's journal and is reading that. So there's flashbacks within flashbacks. And then, of course, at some point they actually read that a diary entry which says, hey, I know that you're reading my journal right now, so you may not be able to trust what I've already written. And the guy's like, oh, what am I going to do now? It's pretty nuts. In addition to the Jackman and Bale and Michael Caine, also Scarlett Johansson and Piper Perabo are in this movie, as well as David Bowie as Nikola Tesla, who Hugh Jackman goes for advice on creating the transported man trick. Really, really fun movie. One of my favorite Christopher Nolan movies, and I like most of his movies quite a bit. I'd like to move on now to Slither. Slither is directed by James Gunn, who did Guardians of the Galaxy and is going to be doing the sequel. Slither is one of those horror comedies or comedic horror movies. There are lots of fun that don't take the mayhem too seriously. Pardon the siren. I don't know if you can hear that. This is siren. Yeah. So an alien parasite lands outside this small town and infects Michael Rooker and takes over his body and his consciousness. And then Michael Rooker goes around infecting other people with the parasites, and it's slow, it's a slow takeover of the town and eventually the planet, if all goes according to the creature's plan. Nathan Fillion, who played the lead in Firefly, of course, and is on that TV show Castle, he plays Bill Party, the sheriff of the town, and his longtime, the girl that he pines for is actually married to Michael Rooker. She's played by Elizabeth Banks. So there's some business going on with that. And also the mayor of the town is played by Greg Henry. Greg Henry is great at playing obnoxious characters, and he does very, very well with this as well. I don't know if you ever saw the Mel Gibson movie Payback, but he's got lots of great scenes in this, in that one, and in this too. Really, really fun movie, and some truly, truly disgusting special effects. Lots of, not much CGI, a little bit, but mostly practical latex makeup effects and appliances and stuff like that. I know some people are big fans of that versus CGI, so there you go. Slither's definitely one you want to take a look at. Next film I'd like to talk about is another documentary. It's called This Film Is Not Yet Rated. It was directed by Kirby Dick, and it's all about trying to figure out how the motion picture ratings board in America works and how to get it to work better. Because the group of people that decide the ratings for movies is very, very secretive. In fact, they don't really talk about who they are, really. As it turns out, he basically hires a private investigator who looks into the background of each of these people by reading their license plates as they enter and leave the building where they meet, and finds out that a lot of them are associated with the large theater chains, the owner of the theater chains. So you have this sort of system whereby the people that exhibit the movies are determining exactly how movies are being rated. They also, of course, have noticed this pattern over the years that the major studios get a lot more lenient treatment from the ratings board as far as the severity of their ratings, whereas an independent movie or a movie which maybe has gay characters will get harsher ratings than movies with straight characters or movies with mass appeal, broadcasting appeal. And this is sort of weighted to favor the large studios, Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, Columbia, Disney, studios like that. So the whole business of the documentary is about exposing these machinations and how they are unfair. I don't know how much effect the documentary has actually had on the rating system itself, whether or not it's more transparent, but it's still a really interesting movie, and of course especially interesting to movie fans like myself. Next, I'd like to talk about a Darren Aronofsky film called The Fountain. The Fountain, until recently, was actually my favorite Aronofsky movie. I have to sort of favor Noah in favor of that. I know a lot of people are really big on The Wrestler and Black Swan and Requiem for a Dream, and those are decent movies, most of them anyway. I'm not actually a big Black Swan fan, but The Fountain is very, very interesting. After seeing this, I sort of came to the conclusion that this was actually a poem in movie form. The main character is played by Hugh Jackman, and he is a doctor, and his wife is played by Rachel Weisz, and she has brain cancer, and he is looking for a way to get rid of it. It's an inoperable tumor, but he's been experimenting with primates on trying to get the tumor reduced on new medications. And he's on the verge of a breakthrough, but he's not following protocols. He's being quite relentless, and his colleagues are really just, sort of fed up with this relentless pursuit of something that he may not be able to achieve before his wife actually dies. In the meantime, Rachel Weisz is writing a story about a Spanish conquistador that lived 500 years earlier, who is sent by the Queen of Spain on a journey to South America to find the Tree of Life and bring back its rejuvenating essence. The Queen basically is in conflict with a character who is a religious figurehead and is intent on stopping her from achieving this because he considers the artificial prolonging of natural life to be heresy and against the word of God, because human beings are supposed to live for a period of time and then die, and that's the natural order of things. So in addition to that, there's also a timeline in which another character played by Hugh Jackman is traveling through space in a bubble. Oh, by the way, I probably didn't mention that the characters in the 19th century, in the story set 500 years later, are also played by Hugh Jackman and Rachel Weisz. He plays the conquistador and she plays the queen, who sends him on his mission. Now, in the future, at some point in another future timeline, we have Hugh Jackman, who looks very different from his other incarnations, who's traveling with a tree in a large bubble traveling through space on his way to a star. And all these stories are related to each other in sort of strangely metaphorical ways. But it turns out they may be more concretely related, but I'm not going to get into that if you haven't seen the movie, because all that sort of comes out at the end. Fascinating movie, really, really interesting movie. Probably not to everyone's taste, but it's one that I found quite interesting. And of course, it's also very beautiful as well. Incredibly well shot movie. Finally, for the first part of this 2006 video, there'll be two parts, and I'd like to conclude for now with Deja Vu, which is one of my favorite films directed by the late Tony Scott. This was a movie that wasn't as popular as Man on Fire or Unstoppable. In fact, some people call it outright stupid, but it's a time travel movie, and I love time travel movies, and I really like this one a lot. I got very, very emotionally involved in ways I didn't expect. The main character is Denzel Washington. He was in a bunch of Tony Scott movies following Crimson Tide. And what this is he is a ATF agent in New Orleans. There is a ferry explosion on a ferry that kills hundreds of people. As it turns out, there was a bomb planted on the ferry that went off. And so while Denzel Washington's character is investigating this, he's approached by an FBI agent played by Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer, of course, has been in a number of Tony Scott movies, including True Romance and Top Gun. And he says to him, hey, we're doing this new investigation technique. We'd like you to get in on it since you're a local guy. None of us are from New Orleans. We'd like a local guy who's very, smart in with us. Okay, so what's the project? He says, how are we going to do this? He says, well, we have this device that can actually look back in time. And so we can observe, he doesn't tell them this at first. He tells them that it's like, data, compiled from any number of different cameras all over the place that's created this sort of virtual recreation of 4 days earlier that they can sort of weave through and look at any point that they want to. So they're going to try and use this device to spot the guy that actually planted the bomb by looking essentially into the past and using that. The bomber is played by Jim Caviezel. Really, really great performance by him. He's supremely creepy in this movie. Paula Patton's also in this movie. And some of the guys who are working with Denzel on the case are Adam Goldberg and Eldon Henson, and I forget the name of the woman that they're in right now. I never really bothered to learn her name. Sorry about that. But this is a really good movie. It's really intense. It gets really, really suspenseful towards the end. I'm not going to get into too much about the details of what exactly happens, but it's exciting. It's an exciting movie. That will conclude, for now, 2006. I'm going to be back with the next video, another 7 titles that I'm recommending from that year. I hope you'll tune in for that. Thank you very much for watching and commenting and for visiting my Facebook page. The link to that's below. I'll see you again real soon. Later.